So last week, just to recap, we looked at the topic of homeostasis. Who can tell me what homeostasis is? So of those who were here last week, I'm going to ask you guys definitely. Marco, can you tell me what homeostasis is? What do you remember by this topic of homeostasis? Are you there, Marco?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember anything about it?
No, I can't remember.
Okay, so your body, in homeostasis, the body maintains balance and optimal internal conditions. Internal conditions in response to external stimuli. Can everyone see my whiteboard? Can you see my whiteboard, Marco? What I'm writing on?
Yeah.
Cool, excellent. So what this means is, as a human being, on your body, there might be something, let me just put the best piece of artwork there. Externally, something might change. And those external changes can be, for example, temperature. The temperature might change externally. What your body needs to do, it needs to maintain an internal temperature. And the internal temperature it needs to maintain has to be around 37.1 degrees Celsius. If the temperature outside gets too hot, then your body has to respond to cool itself down. Because if it goes above the temperature it needs to be at, then you're going to be in problems. So to cool itself down, the body will do things like sweat. And when you sweat, your body temperature goes down, which we're going to learn about. It will do other things as well. If it gets too cold outside, then your body needs to maintain 37.1 degrees Celsius, because if it goes lower than that, you're going to have problems. As you mentioned last week, when your body temperature is too high or too low, the enzymes in your body that help your reactions, those enzymes, they'll stop working. So to maintain 37.1 degrees Celsius, if you get too hot, you might sweat, for example. If you get too cold, what will your body do? Well, I'll explain it for now because we're just recapping. You'll start shivering. Because when you shiver, you use energy. And when you use energy, you do something called respiration. And when you respire, you make what we call heat. So this is just a rough, don't copy any of this, you don't have to, it's recorded anyway. It's just a rough recap of last week's lesson. So I'm going to make the PowerPoint large now because homeostasis is one of the biggest topics in biology and it needs a lot of time. Okay, so here we are. The PowerPoint's up. Hope you can all see it. Homeostasis and response is our lesson. Get the title down. We have one more student here, Huzaifa. And we're going to admit him. So once you've got the title down, what we're going to do next, we're going to just recap what we done last week. Last week, and I'm going to quiz you a little bit as well, guys. Last week, we defined homeostasis, okay? We defined homeostasis as in the red box here. Controlling internal conditions, controlling what's happening inside your body in order to maintain optimum conditions for bodily responses. It means your body has to respond to things. Okay, if it doesn't respond, internally you're going to change. Your temperature is going to go too high. The amount of toxic substance in your blood will go high. For example, if you're not urinating properly or going to the toilet properly, those toxins that would come out in your urine will build up in your body. If that happens, you're going to have problems. So you need to control these conditions internally. You need to urinate properly. You need to go to the bathroom properly. You need to sweat properly so that your body inside stays balanced. There's not a buildup of toxins. There's not a buildup of heat. It doesn't get too cold, and so on and so forth. Okay, so some examples of homeostasis in our bodies. We control a number of things we said last week. And last week's lesson's recorded as well. So if you need it, I'll send it to you. We control our temperature. We control our iron content. We control our water content. We control our blood glucose. So temperature, how do we control it? We can increase our temperature by shivering, lose it by sweating. Huzaifa, what's iron content in the body? What do we mean by iron content?
The amount of ions in the blood.
Okay, So ions are atoms with a charge. You might have a calcium ion, which is just a calcium atom with a charge. You might have a sodium ion, which is a sodium atom, but it has a charge. These ions come from the food we eat. If I eat salt, which is sodium chloride, it contains sodium ions and chlorine ions. Now, those ions in my body, my cells need them to do reactions. But if I eat too much salt, my body will get rid of it through urine. It'll get rid of the sodium ions because too much sodium is poisonous. So you increase your iron content by eating and drinking as well. You drink Lucozade or some of these sports drinks, they contain ions in them. You lose it by sweating or urine. Water content. How do I increase or decrease my water content, Marco?
You drink. Wait.
Good. You drink water and you increase it. How would you decrease your water content, Mr. Yasser? You increase it by drinking and you lose it by sweating or urinating, okay? Blood glucose.
I wasn't here last week.
Oh, you wasn't here last week? No problem. This is good for you then. It's just something to recap. It's recorded as well. Blood glucose. So where does blood glucose come from? Let me ask Ajay. Ajay, where do you think the glucose in your blood is coming from? The blood glucose comes from sugar. And sugar comes from the food we eat, carbohydrates and other things, yeah? So your blood glucose, you increase it by eating sugars or increase it by eating carbohydrates. Now your blood glucose, if it goes too high, so your blood glucose needs to be controlled. And that's controlled by something called insulin. Your body releases insulin and it makes your blood glucose go down because it turns the glucose into something else called glycogen, which we'll talk about later. But hormones, basically. Insulin is an example of a hormone. If your body releases insulin, your blood glucose goes down. So these are all things that homeostasis involves controlling: temperature, iron content, water content, and blood glucose. We need to learn about them in detail. So we said there's different cells, and so this first 20 minutes or 10 minutes is just going to be a recap. We said that, first of all, if you have an increased temperature, increased iron content, increased water content, increased blood glucose, your body has to know that's happened. Your body has to detect it. And it detects it by using what we call receptors. There's special cells that detect an increase in temperature or a decrease, an increase in iron content or a decrease, an increase in the amount of water you have or a decrease. All of these things are detected by the body's sensors, okay? Special cells. Then the brain or the spine has to say, look, I've detected too much sugar. I've detected a high temperature. I need to respond to it. So it will coordinate a response. It will tell the body what to do. And then the response will be carried out. Your body will respond by using effectors. Muscles and glands. Glands release chemicals. Muscles help you to move. So muscles and glands will work together sometimes to allow your body to respond. So muscles, for example, start shivering when you're cold, when you're too cold. They'll respond because the brain's telling them, start shivering. Why? Because I've detected using my receptors that it's getting cold. So your muscles are responding. Your brain will tell your endocrine system, yeah, or your pancreas to release insulin. Why? Because there's too much sugar detected. So there's always detection, the response of the brain, and effection, which is what you're going to do in return. So this involves the nervous system. The nervous system has these three things within it. If you look at the nervous system, can everyone see my whiteboard? Just one person can answer if they want. Can you see my whiteboard, Yasser?
Yeah.
I'm writing on. Yeah. The nervous system has three parts to it. It detects. Again, we wrote this down last week. It coordinates. Coordinates. And it responds. And when it does those things, for you to detect something, you need receptors. Those are cells which detect. For you to coordinate, you need your nervous system or your brain and spinal cord. Those two things decide what to do with the signals. And for you to respond, your muscles have to do something, or your glands. Glands are those things in your body that release chemicals. Okay, so those three things are very important. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint just to make sure. Okay, the PowerPoint is back on. If you can't see it, let me know. So you have receptors in different places. You have light receptors in your eyes, sound receptors in your ears, taste receptors in your tongue, smell receptors in your nose. All these basically are different types of cell that detect different things. You can detect smell, taste, sound, and light, for example. So when you have a cold, what it does, the smell receptors in your nose don't function effectively. That's why you can't smell properly when you have a cold, okay? And so on and so forth. You've got many different types of receptors. So nervous reactions. So what happens? You detect something. You detect a change in the environment. It gets hotter, it gets colder, you get slapped in the head, something happens, yeah? If you detect that change, the receptor takes it and sends it to your brain or spinal cord. It takes it to the coordinator. Your brain or spinal cord sends it to the effector, a muscle or a gland, and then you respond. Your sweat glands might open for you to sweat. Your muscles might start shivering for you to get warmer. So all of these things happen together. Now, I'm not going to go through examples because we've done that all last week. I'm not going to go through this because it's basically the same thing we looked at, okay? There is a bit of more detail in this stimulus topic. There is a bit of more detail when we talk about receptors, coordinators, and effectors, what we just spoke about. So let's talk about that detail a little bit. First of all, you have two types of actions, conscious and unconscious. So let me just make a new slide to recap. Again, this is all a recap. I wouldn't be talking this much if I don't recap, if it wasn't a recap. So you've got two types of actions, conscious and unconscious actions. Now, conscious action is one that you're in control of, one that you can think about. You can think about your response. An unconscious action is one that you're not in control of, not in control. You don't think about it in your brain. It doesn't take brain power, so brain not involved much. So a conscious action might be, for example, oh, it's hot outside. I've detected it. I'm going to take off my jacket. I've had time to think about it and I've made a response. An unconscious action might be, for example, when you touch an electrical socket, as you can see in this picture. If you can't see the picture, let me know. As soon as you touch that electrical socket, the signal will go through your body. You don't have enough time to think. If you touch that for 2 seconds too long, you're going to die or you're going to be seriously injured. So the body has got a special way of dealing with this. The response, the coordination doesn't happen from your brain. When you get this signal, it goes to your spinal cord. And your spinal cord sends a signal back telling your hand to move away. Normally things go to your brain and you have time to think about what you want your body to do. In a reflex action or an unconscious action, something that you don't think about, the signal goes only to your spine and then it goes back to your muscle to make you do the movement. Why? Why don't we want to take this to the brain? What do we say, Marco? Why would it be a problem for this signal to go to your brain and then your brain to decide what to do instead of your spine? Any idea, Marco?
It'll take too long.
Very, very good. Yeah, time. Time is very important. Your brain will take time to think about it. And your brain can't be trusted. Someone who's crazy will just say, you know what, I'm enjoying this shock. I'm going to keep on going. There's nutty people out there. Yeah. So your spine takes care of that craziness. It says, look, there's too much time for it to go to the brain. It's going to take too long to think about the response. The response that the brain makes might not be a good response. So I'm going to take care of it. It goes to your spine and your spine automatically responds. You have no choice in the matter. So some of these reflex actions, like when you touch something hot, the signal goes from the receptor down your wire. Every signal travels through certain wires and cells to the brain or to the spine. The wire it travels through is known as your sensory neuron. Again, we said this last week. It goes to your spinal cord. And in your spinal cord, the message needs to come back to your hand to tell it to move. So there's something called a relay neuron. It's another wire, which helps you to take the signal and send it back, relay. You're sending something back. That signal then goes back through your motor neuron. This is a wire through which you have an effect. So when you want to move or something, when you want to respond to something, the signal goes through the motor neuron to where you want to respond from. And then your response happens, and then you'll move. Your muscle will start saying, look, I need to move. So there's a few things. By bypassing the conscious part of the brain, by the message not going to the brain, yeah, the brain's not involved here, just the spinal cord, the response is much quicker. That's why we have a reflex, to make quick responses to help us save our lives. So these neurons, we mentioned the word neurons. Without neurons, none of this is happening because a signal has to go to your brain or spinal cord and then it has to send that signal back to tell you what to do. Those signals go and come back through what we call neurons. Okay? So the neurons have different parts. We labeled it last week. Okay, and obviously we're not going to go through that again because we've already done it. We've talked about all of this. So you have what we call nerve cells. Nerve cells help you to send the signals across your body. We looked at synapses, what happens there. We filled in a blanks task. Again, this is recorded, so I'll send you the recording in case you missed it. We looked at the brain, the different parts of it, what they do. So check the recording if you want to see that. And we finished all of this off. We're going to move on to something new now. We looked at the eye. We labeled all the different parts. We looked at light, how it goes into the eye, and how you can see things. A lot of stuff. But it's all recorded, so don't worry. If you can't find the recording, if you don't understand it, I'll explain it to you again. For now, so for example, here we looked at how the eye responds. Light goes into the eye, it's detected. If there's too much light going in, this iris and pupil, they go smaller. The eye responds. Because your brain says to the eye, you know what, there's too much light coming in, make yourself smaller. If there's not enough light coming in, it will go big. Because your brain now says to the eye, there's not enough light coming in, go bigger so you can get more light coming in. Okay, so when it's dark, this is what happens. When it's bright, this is what happens. This is unconscious. You're not even thinking about this. Your brain's doing it without you being able to think about it. Because it would be too much to think about. If you had to think about every time the light goes dark and the light goes bright, how to make your eyes bigger and smaller, it would take too long. So we've been made in a very special way. We looked at laser surgery. Now we're going to look at one thing in more detail. So remember, now we're going to start the lesson for today. Last week, we looked at the 3 or 4 things that you control in your body. Temperature, iron content, waste products, and other things, yeah? Water content, and so on and so forth. We're going to start looking in more detail at temperature. So I want you guys to get the title down. Controlling body. Who can tell me what part of the brain controls body temperature? The name of the part. There's a special part. Do you know it, Huzaifa?
Nah.
No problem. Audrey, do you know what part of the brain controls temperature?
Is it a center?
It's a center in the brain. You're close. It's one of the centers of the brain. But there's a... No problem, don't worry. Thermoregulatory. There's a very good one. There's something called a thermoregulatory center in the brain. It detects blood. There's also what we call the hypothalamus, which we're going to talk about. So write this down, controlling body temperature. First of all, our body temperature is sensed by the sensors in our skin. Those sensors then send a signal to our brain. Our blood also warms up. When it's hot outside, our blood warms up. As our blood becomes warmer, our blood's passing through all of our body. It's going to end up passing or near our brain. And due to that, your brain can detect warm blood. So the thermoregulatory center in the brain detects warm blood. Also, temperature sensors in the skin detect the heat and send information to the brain. So the brain's getting overloaded from 2 places. The thermoregulatory center is detecting it, and the skin sending a signal. The brain's getting 2 signals saying, look, it's getting warm, you need to sort it out. That's very important. So now, the next thing that happens, you guys can write that down. So the nerve endings in the skin, the receptors detect the external temperature. Temperature detectors in the brain detect the blood temperature. The brain coordinates a response using hormones. So this is important to copy because the hormones part is very important. The brain releases some hormones, some chemicals. And effectors, the sweat glands, carry out the response. So you can see a picture, while you're copying that down, you can see a picture on the left here of the heat signature of a body. There's some cameras that can detect where the most heat in the body is made or coming out from. Notice your spine, there's a lot of heat there because there's a lot of activity going on down there. So it gets quite warm. Also, look at how your body responds. Sometimes your hair stand up. When you get cold, your hair can stand up to trap heat. So weird things happen. These are responses. I'm going to ask you guys if I can move on in a bit, and if you are still copying, you just let me know, okay? So if you don't let me know that you're still copying, 5 seconds after I ask you, that's how we do this lesson, then I can move on. So can I move on? If you're copying, just say, wait a second, sir.
Wait a second.
Okay, good, yes, sir. Let's wait a bit for Yasser to copy. Whilst people copy, the other thing that's great about this lesson is you can ask me questions. on anything you're not sure about, any extra information on this topic, you can do all of that as well. Okay, done. So I'm going to move on unless anyone says no. So look at this. There's two things that the body does. One is called vasoconstriction. We're going to learn about this. And the other is called vasodilation. Let's talk about it before we take any notes down. When you get cold, your blood vessels, they get smaller. Okay, they get smaller. 1 second. There's one more student who wants to join. Let me just make sure I can get her in. Admit. So when you get cold, your blood vessel gets smaller. What is the reason for your blood vessels getting smaller? Can anyone tell me? Why does your body make your blood vessels smaller when you get cold? Anyone can tell me. No one sure?
It reduces heat loss.
Exactly, because if there's less blood passing through, there's less blood to lose heat, because blood loses heat. Yeah? If you have less blood that's passing through the blood vessel, then less of the heat can be lost from the blood. So good, Huzaifa, it reduces heat loss. It's called vasoconstriction. Vasoconstriction is when your blood vessels get smaller. Now, that's what happens when it's cold. So you can imagine that when it's hot, if you look at the blood vessel, when it's hot, look at it, it's small when it's cold. When it gets hot, the blood vessel will get larger. And we call that vasodilation. It gets larger. It doesn't, not only does it get larger, as it expands, it goes closer to the surface. When you're closer to the surface, you can lose heat more easily through the surface. Okay, so there's vasodilation, which is, dilation means getting bigger. Even when your eyes get bigger, we call it the pupils dilating. We say the pupils are dilating. So vasodilation, the blood vessel gets bigger and it gets closer to the surface, so you can lose more heat. All right, now, when it gets closer to the surface, if you look at that blue thing that just popped up, what happens? This forces your sweat glands to release water. The heat goes and gets transferred into the water. The heat from your blood goes to the water in your sweat glands or to the liquid. Because of that, the water now escapes as it gets hotter and it comes outside of your skin. So this is very important. I want you guys to take what I've just said and summarize it in a paragraph. Write down maintaining body temperature. I want you to use the words vasoconstriction and vasodilation in your answer. So this might be a 6-mark question. In fact, let's make it a 6-mark question. I'm just going to get my my drawing app up. So how would you answer to this in an exam? That's what we're going to look at. We're going to do it together. So 6-marker. Yes, so can you see the whiteboard here? The 6-mark question is on the whiteboard as well. Explain the processes involved in the homeostasis of body temperature. I've written it down here. Is it going okay, Marco?
Yeah.
Good man, Marco. Doing very well. Okay, we have 1 more minute left. At 4:48, we'll go through the answer together. Okay, so let's wrap up the writing. I'm going to use Yasser to give me an answer today. I'm going to write down what Yasser says as he goes along. And the rest of you can add points to it after and say, look, Yasser could have said this, Yasser could have said that if you want. Go on, Yasser, tell me what your answer is.
So I wrote it.
Give me 1 second.
I wasn't sure.
What was
I
it?
wasn't sure, but
That's fine. Give me 1 second. Let me just tell the class. As Yasser answers the question, I'm going to put important points that he says on the whiteboard. Yeah. So just make sure you can all see the whiteboard. If you can't, let me know. Yeah. Go on, Yasser.
I said temperature. I mean, brain coordinates a response using hormones.
So let me write that down. Yasser said the brain coordinates a response. And he says it happens because of it uses hormones. So that's good. The brain does coordinate a response. He made 1 point. Next one.
I think it says
Did you say
nerve endings detect external heat.
nerve endings detect external heat. Okay, I'm going to put a little star there because we're going to talk about that in a second. What else, Yasser?
Temperature. No, something in the brain detects the blood temp.
Yeah, so the brain detects the blood temperature, but you said something, which you're close, so we're going to put a little star there because we could have said something else. Brain detects blood temperature. Good so far anyway. You're getting a lot of it. We need to get 6, so we're going to see how to get that 6. Go on, what else?
That's all I wrote. So
That's all you got. Okay. So Yasser made 3 points here. He could have improved this one here. So we call that star 1, we call that star 2. Nerve endings detect external. At star 1, he could have written changes. Just not heat, the change in heat. Changes in heat. Number 3, star 2. What could Yasser have written here? Can anyone tell me? What could he have written to make his answer more accurate? He had a good try, but the brain detects the blood temperature. What part of the brain? We want to talk about the part which is the thermoregulatory center, or even the hypothalamus. So because you guys have learned about the thermoregulatory center, he could have mentioned thermoregulatory center there. Regulatory. Okay, that's the 2 things he could have mentioned. So he's mentioned 3 points. 1, 2, 3. Because he was lacking some information here and here, yeah, they might still give him the mark because he's had the right idea. So there's a risk. He probably will get 3 marks out of 6 for this. If it was in good English, maybe 4, but I doubt they'd give 4. Why? Because there's not enough detail here. In English, when they're talking about good English, they're also talking about detail. They want good detail. So what 3 other points is he missing? I'm going to ask someone, unless someone volunteers. If someone you're choosing Marco. You can't volunteer someone. They have to volunteer themselves. If someone doesn't volunteer in the next 5 seconds, I'll choose someone. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's choose for today. Let's choose Ajr, because Ajr's new here as well. And Ajr's a very smart student. Go on, Ajr. Tell us.
Isn't it you have to mention like vasodilation? And
What did he say about vas? Tell us what you said.
When your blood vessels expand, increasing the blood flow to the surface of the skin, it means more heat is lost. This effectively cools you down and is called vasodilation.
Okay. When blood vessels expand, because you get hot, the blood vessels expand.
Yeah.
They get closer to the skin. They get closer to the skin and glands, allowing heat to be lost more effectively. So as I'm writing this, guys, you can copy, because this is your answer. You need to be able to say this: heat to be lost more effectively. And the key thing examiners will get really excited about. I'm making it look like they have sad lives. They get excited about this stuff. It's called vasodilation. They want the word in. Vasodilation. Okay? So vasodilation. Now, I'll write that a bit neater because it looks like it's written in Greek right now. So vasodilation. Now the last bit, so 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 4 points. We've got how the brain detects. The nerve endings detect it, the brain detects it. We talked about how that could be improved. We talked about the brain coordinating a response. So the brain tells the blood vessels, or it tells the body what to do in response to the heat or the cold. What else? What else could we say? We've talked about what happens when you get hot. Huzaifa, tell us about the next bit we could talk about here.
When it's cold,
Yeah,
the blood vessels constrict.
yeah.
In the end, that less heat is lost, called
Very-
vasoconstriction.
Very good. Very good. When it's cold, blood vessels get smaller or they constrict. Blood vessels constrict. One other thing you could have mentioned, They are not as close to the surface of the skin when that happens. They are not as close to skin surface. Close to skin surface. And to add to that, less blood flow, because they constrict, there's less blood flow, means less heat lost. Means less heat lost. So you can see how 2 or 3 slides, you've learned a lot in 2 or 3 slides. You could have said a lot about it. When you get an answer in GCSE biology, you want a comprehensive answer to get a grade 9. Yeah? 3 points are good. Yeah, Yasser done really well at the start. It's just considering it's his first lesson. However, now, Yasser and the rest of you know that you have to mention keywords like vasodilation, vasoconstriction. Yeah, vasoconstriction. I've mentioned vasoconstriction here just because we're running out of space. I'll mention it towards the right slightly. So you've got to mention stuff like that, vasoconstriction. And we'll put 3 dots here just to show you that we have to complete that sentence. So you've got to mention those keywords, very important. You've got to mention exactly what's going on. You've got to mention the whole process. Is that okay, guys?
When you blush, is it vasodilation or vasoconstriction?
When you blush, it's a very good question. When you blush, the blood comes to the surface of your skin. So vasodilation happens. Blushing is a part of excitement. When people get excited, blood flows at a higher rate. When blood flows at a higher rate, it means your vessels will expand and they'll get closer to your surface. That's why if you're really excited and if you're blushing a lot, sometimes you'll even sweat with that. Does that make sense? It's a great,
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Okay, so let me open up the PowerPoint. Now, the PowerPoint's back up. Can everyone see it? One person can answer. So Yasser, can you see it?
I can
Yasser?
see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. That means everyone can see it. So we looked at vasodilation and vasoconstriction. We looked at body heat, maintaining it. We looked at it in a very technical and detailed way. So now we're going to look at hormones. This is a difficult topic, but we're going to talk about it. Okay? I want you guys to just copy this down first. Okay? Fill in whatever blanks you can. Whatever blanks you can. You won't be able to do all of it. You might not even understand most of it, but we're going to learn it. After you copy it down and try your best to fill in the blanks, just tell me on the microphone, and then we can explain it. So you can see a picture there of the adrenal glands, adrenaline. If you're ever about to get into a fight or you're running away from danger, you get a feeling of worry. That feeling of worry comes from adrenaline, and that's released by these glands called adrenal glands in your body. You can see the picture there. Yeah, that little white gland. What happens when adrenaline is released? It closes off parts of your brain as well. So you know when people, while you're right, I can tell you a little bit about this. When people get very angry, the body releases certain hormones and they close off parts of the brain. And those parts of the brain are responsible for thinking clearly. When you get angry, you can't think clearly sometimes. You get very, very angry, you say something or you do something that you shouldn't have done, and you regret it later. The reason you regret it later is because at a later point in time, the adrenaline has gone down and something called cortisol has gone down. Because when you get angry, the body releases adrenaline and cortisol. So when you're getting angry, because these hormones are released, you can't think clearly and you might do something that you wouldn't normally do. And when you've calmed down later, because the hormones are not there anymore, your brain can think again, and then you realize after thinking about it, man, I shouldn't have done that. That was wrong. What was I thinking? You know, a lot of people say, what was I thinking when I was angry? Yeah, it makes a lot of sense because your brain actually closes off things when you're angry. The hormones close off parts of your brain. This is why when you get angry, you should always walk away from a situation because your response will not be a smart one, usually. So as soon as any of you finish writing this, tell me. Now we'll go on. We're going to start talking about this. First of all, I'm going to tell you the answers, and then we're going to explain each answer so you understand comprehensively what's going on. So let me minimize this screen a bit. Not minimize it completely, but let's take it to the right a bit. And let's talk on our whiteboard as well about what's going on here.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So what I'm going to do on the whiteboard. So we're looking in a little bit more detail at this very important topic of hormones. Hormones. What are hormones? They're basically chemicals in the body. Your body releases these chemicals. For example, adrenaline is a hormone. Adrenaline is a chemical that the body releases to help you run away from a situation when you're in danger. Testosterone is another hormone that men release in their sex organs. It makes you a man, it makes you grow hair, which is why sometimes female weightlifters take testosterone. They end up looking like men. They end up growing hair on their face. Certain body parts get smaller, their hips get smaller, and they look more like men. So testosterone helps you to grow hair. Also gives you aggression. It can make you angry. Yeah. So men are traditionally more aggressive than women, and that's linked to their testosterone levels. There's other examples like progesterone. Progesterone is another hormone that's made by the ovaries or the women's sexual organs, and that's used and helps with birth and other female related topics. So it's basically a very female hormone. Testosterone is male, progesterone is female. Now in your brain, you have something very important. So if you've got your face, for example, in your brain, there's a little hanging bit called your pituitary gland. Pituitary gland. This is very interesting because when people get punched in the head a lot, when they play football, when they get hit in the head, even when you're heading a ball in football, what happens, it impacts your brain. And this gland gets affected and it can't release hormones properly. And when it can't release hormones properly, a person's behavior starts getting very, very weird. It starts going down the drain. This is why boxers, wrestlers, American football players, all of those guys who get in the head, they get head injuries. Part of the head injury makes their pituitary gland stop working properly. Because of that, they can't release necessary hormones for their body to work properly, and they have problems. Okay? So these hormones, they're basically chemicals. And they're chemical messengers. What does that mean? They send a message. If I don't send you a message that there's going to be a lesson today, you'll not know, and you'll lose out, or I'll lose out. Something will happen. If your body can't send messages around, you'll lose function. You won't be able to do things properly. So different parts of the body produce different hormones. There's something called a pancreas near your stomach that produces a very important hormone called insulin, which we're going to look at in more detail. Yeah. There's something called your adrenal glands, which produce adrenaline, another very important hormone that you can't live without. There's something called your testes, which is your reproductive organs. They produce important hormones like testosterone. So this slide over here is basically dealing with all of those different hormones. So if we talk about it, hormones are chemical messengers produced by the endocrine system. Now what does that mean? Or by endocrine glands? All of these glands, all of these things that produce hormones, whether it's your, let me just make a clean bit of paper here, whether it's your pituitary gland that produces hormones, pituitary, that's one of the things that produces hormones, adrenal gland, that's another thing that makes hormones, your pancreas, that's another thing that makes hormones. All of these things that make hormones, they're controlled by your brain. The brain tells them what to do. All of these things together, they make a system. And that system is known as your endocrine system. Your endocrine system is a system responsible for making hormones. And this is all in the PowerPoint, so you can see it. So your hormones are made using the system. For something to be a system, it needs glands. It needs the things that make the hormones. And it needs the brain to control them. It also needs sensors to sense when you need to make a hormone or receptors. So you've got all of these things involved. When you have many things involved, you call it a system. These are the endocrine glands. These ones. The things that make the hormones are known as your endocrine glands. Endocrine glands. So, if we go back to our PowerPoint, that should give us some context. Hormones are chemical messengers. They're things that send messages. They're made by what we call endocrine glands. They control the way in which parts of the body work and are transported to their target organs in the bloodstream. When your brain releases a hormone, your blood takes it to the rest of your body. When your pancreas releases a hormone, your blood takes it around. When your hormones are released, it's your blood that takes it around. Okay? The pituitary gland in your brain produces two important things which we're going to learn about when we learn about reproduction. It produces something called FSH and LH. We're going to talk about what these are later. But just now, we need to know that it produces these two things. Testes, your reproductive system, your private parts, they produce testosterone. And the ovaries produce progesterone. Does that make sense, guys?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on that? So it's 11 past 5. Do you guys want a small breather? I want to ask each one of you. Huzaifa?
Yeah.
How long? 5 or 10?
12.
12. Andrew, how long do you want to break for?
11.
11? Oh, I'm going to make me do your averages. You guys make my life hard. Yes, sir?
12.5.
Oh, you're crazy. Marco?
11.5.
11.5. All right, let's give you guys 12. You guys are funny. Hannah, you okay? Can everyone see the PowerPoint with hormones coming up?
Yeah.
Good job. Okay. So now we've understood all of this and how to fill in the blanks. Arjun made a very important point, a good point actually. She said, what about glucagon? So the pancreas produces something called glucagon. It also produces insulin, which helps to make glycogen. So glucagon is a hormone. Glycogen is what sugar turns into. You okay, Huzaifa?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, so we're looking at hormones. This is an example of an adrenal gland. In an exam, you have to know where these glands are in the body. So what we're going to do, I'm going to get you guys to draw a rough diagram, titled the endocrine system. Draw this diagram out, and then try and label where you think the different parts are, okay? I could give you a sheet with this already drawn. Yeah, I could have sent that to you earlier. So next time I probably will do that. But drawing it is also good because it gives you practice. Biological drawings can be a good thing. Draw it and try and label where the bits on the left you think should go. After you do it, just say. Whoever's done it, just say it on the mic, and then we can go through it. This is one of the most detailed topics in GCSE. There's a lot in homeostasis. You've got nervous system, you've got hormones, you've got the eye, you've got a lot in here. At the brain at the top, who can tell me what the organ is right under the brain? Pituitary, exactly. You mentioned it earlier. You remembered it well. Did you know that before today, Huzaifa?
Yeah.
You did know it, good. The second one, nearby, is called your hypothalamus. So your pituitary gland and your thermoregulatory center, the place that that takes care of your temperature, are next to each other. Your hypothalamus is part of your thermoregulatory center. In your neck, you have a gland. If it doesn't work properly, you gain weight very easily. My friend has this problem. What gland is this? Can anyone tell me? Can anyone tell me? This is called thyroid gland. Because what happens is, if you don't have enough iodine, if you have a problem with the iodine in your body, your thyroid has problems. So your thyroid and your iodine. Now here, we're going to have just above your pancreas, we have the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are little white blobs above your pancreas. Your pancreas looks like a chewed up piece of chewing gum, as you can see here, yeah? Number 5 is your kidney, those things that look like little beans. Number 6 is the pancreas, the chewed up piece of chewing gum. Number 7 are your ovaries, if you're a female. And if you're a male, you'd have testes around there. And I think that is it. So copy these down, guys, the correct answers. Make sure you remember where they are for future as a revision exercise. How many of them did you get, Huzaifa, first time?
I got all of them apart from the 2.
The last 2?
No, the second and third.
Okay, cool. Now you know, it's good. So, I'm going to move to the next slide if you guys are okay. If you're not, just tell me. But if you are, if you don't say anything, I'll move to the next slide. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, Marco, you okay? Okay. So we're going to look at the pituitary in more detail. This gland underneath your brain, which we said, if it gets damaged, you have big problems sometimes. In fact, if any part of your brain gets damaged, you have problems. But if your gland is not working to release hormones, you see the problems in other parts of your body. So what we're going to do, we're going to try and fill in this blank. And we're going to go through it. I'll give you a few minutes to fill it in. And then we're going to watch a small video after. No one's
done.
Done? Okay. Good. So I'm going to talk about it a little bit. Even if you guys are still writing, it's not a problem because I'm going to leave half of it open here. And the other half of the page, I'm going to put my animation up on my whiteboard. So let me just make sure you guys can see everything. Share that screen. I'm sure you guys can see it. So the pituitary gland, what it does in more detail. Pituitary gland. And you can see the style of these lessons is very exam focused. So I'm teaching you exactly what you need to know. The pituitary gland releases hormones. Yeah, it releases hormones. Those hormones then trigger the release of other hormones. It's like dominoes. If I push down a domino, it will push other dominoes down because of it. So the hormones that are released by the pituitary gland. They push other hormones into action. So the pituitary gland is like a master gland in a way. It controls a lot of other things. So it might release one hormone, which will go to other glands. So other glands will then release other hormones. So this one hormone that's released, it might go to the pancreas, it might go to the adrenal glands. You might be releasing insulin from the pancreas, and you might be releasing adrenaline at the same time. For example, just a rough example, yeah? How does that happen? Because the pituitary gland sent a hormone, and that hormone acted in many places. So it's what we call a master gland. The master controls everything. That's what master means, effectively. So when we look at the pituitary gland on our fill in the blanks task, we can say it's a master gland which secretes several hormones into the blood. So it might secrete one hormone that activates the pancreas, for example, and it might activate the adrenal glands, which release adrenaline at the same time. It might release another hormone, which activates something else. Just a rough note. So the pituitary gland can release different hormones that in turn activate other hormones in other glands. So where does it release the hormones? It releases them into the blood, because at the top of the body you have the brain. The pituitary gland releases the hormone. It goes into the bloodstream, and the blood carries it around the rest of the body. It might carry it to the pancreas, which triggers the pancreas to release insulin. It might carry it to the adrenal glands, which triggers you to release adrenaline, and other places. So what we say here on the left, the pituitary gland is a master gland which secretes several hormones into the bloodstream in response to body conditions. So your body detects something. When you detect something, it goes to your brain first. So you detect something using a receptor, which is what we learned about earlier. We're bringing it all together now. The receptor detects something, it goes to your brain. Your brain now needs to do a response. So your pituitary gland might be part of that response. It might release a hormone telling different parts of the body to do different things. So we'll say it again. The pituitary gland is a master gland which secretes several hormones into the bloodstream in response to body conditions, yeah, in response to something that's being detected. These hormones act in turn on other hormones. So the hormones that the pituitary gland releases, they might act on other hormones. And in order to cause different hormones to be released and bring about other responses. So when the pituitary gland releases a hormone, other hormones might be released because of it from other glands, and they might cause other things to happen. You might get your sugar levels down, you might get your adrenaline up, because the pituitary gland is controlling things from the top. Does that make sense, guys? Or let me put it this way, does it not make sense to anyone? So if it makes sense, we are ready to continue. Now, we're going to continue with a bit of video, I think, in a second. Let me just make sure you guys have got all of this. we're going to look at controlling blood sugar levels, but we're going to look at it in a less boring way. And we're just going to watch this. As you watch it, I want you to take rough notes if you can, yeah? Because it summarizes a lot of what we've learned and it's got some extra stuff in it as well.
This section is about human hormones. Communication between various parts of the body is maintained both by the nervous system and by hormones. Hormones are chemical messengers that pass around the body and bring about changes in the body. Hormones are produced by glands in various parts of the body. The pituitary gland controls growth rate, menstrual cycle, and lactation. The thyroid gland produces thyroxine, which controls the metabolic rate. The adrenal gland produces adrenaline and affects our fight-or-flight responses by increasing heart rate and blood sugar levels and directing blood to muscles and brain. The pancreas produces insulin, which controls blood sugar levels. The testes produce testosterone, which causes male puberty changes and stimulates the production of sperm. The ovaries produce estrogen, which causes female puberty changes and helps control the menstrual cycle. Hormones are produced by glands and secreted into the bloodstream. They're transported around the body in the blood. Hormones affect specific cells, target cells, elsewhere in the body. Generally, hormones have slow, long-lasting effects. Adrenaline and insulin are two hormones that have more rapid effects. Now we look at two hormones in detail, insulin and sex hormones. First, insulin. The next...
It's insulin, guys. Ignore the H in there. I don't know. Maybe he's just not saying it properly, but it's insulin.
Clip is about insulin. As you watch it, note down the ways it controls the sugar level in the blood and what happens when it doesn't.
So note down the ways it said it controls the sugar levels in the blood and what happens when it doesn't. So you can make a little subheading called insulin, and I'm going to let the video play. If it's going too fast, just say pause, sir. And I'm going to pause it and we're going to repeat that a little bit. Okay?
Insulin is produced by an organ called the pancreas, which is found just behind the stomach.
So insulin produced by pancreas, you might write that down.
The white specks are made up of cells which produce insulin. The function of insulin is to enable sugar in the form of glucose to pass from the blood into the cells. If insulin is absent, glucose can't enter, and the cells are starved of fuel.
So the glucose that you have needs to go into your cells for respiration. The glucose can't go into the cells until you open the door of the cell. And the key that opens that door is insulin. Insulin opens up the cells and allows glucose to go in. Without insulin, glucose won't go into your cell. Think of it as a key. So your pancreas needs to make insulin so that your cells can get glucose. Otherwise, the glucose, it's poison.
Sugar accumulates in the blood. Because the muscles are starved of sugar, the body makes energy from its fat and protein reserves, so the person loses a lot of weight.
So you could be eating a lot of sugar and you could not gain weight. You might be as skinny as this kid here because he's got a problem. He's not making enough insulin. So what does he need to do? He needs to take an insulin injection, and that allows the insulin to work, to be in his body so that sugar can go into his cells. If you don't have insulin, if the cells can't get sugar for energy, the body will start to break down muscle and fat. And if it starts to break down muscle and fat, all of your muscles and all of your fat will disappear. And therefore you'll become bony, like that picture. And also your heart is a muscle, so your heart will become weak because your body will start breaking down your heart to make energy.
You should have noticed that insulin is produced naturally in the pancreas to control the level of sugar in the blood. It helps sugar in the form of glucose pass from the blood into the cells. It also controls the level of sugar in the blood by increasing the rate at which the liver can convert sugar into glycogen.
So I want you guys to copy this down, yeah? You know it's made in the pancreas, controls the level of sugar, helps the sugar to pass into cells, and also allows your liver to convert sugar into something called glycogen. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Just get all of that down for now. Also at the end, you'll see it says when blood sugar returns to normal, you stop making insulin. Your body will stop making the insulin when you have normal sugar in your blood. If you have too much sugar in your blood, it's going to be used to make energy, or it's going to be turned into glycogen. Two things can happen to sugar. It can go into your cells and make energy, or the insulin also can cause it to go into the liver. And what happens in the liver, the insulin becomes glycogen. And what happens to the glycogen, it then becomes fat. Which is why if you eat too much sugar, you get fat. Because it becomes glycogen, you have enough for energy, that's got to be used up. Whatever's left over will become glycogen, and then the next stage from glycogen is fat.
I'm done.
Done, well done. Okay, I'm going to give you, the rest of you guys, another 30 seconds. And if that's too short, you can let me know. If not, we will carry on. Let me just put my stopwatch on. 30 seconds to go. So as you're writing, you guys can ask me questions, anything you're not sure about, any unrelated topic on this, you can ask me about as well.
Do we need to know about TSH and ADH?
Yeah, it depends. See, when we look at, tell me more about it. Tell me more about what you know about it, and we'll talk from there. Go on.
It's like the pituitary gland produces TSH and it also produces ADH.
FSH, remember FSH?
Yeah.
Yeah.
As
So
well as FSH and LH.
Yeah, and LH, yeah. Those things are going to pop up when we look at reproduction. So in reproduction, we will go over it. We have to know bits of that as well. Yeah? But it's not too complicated. So it's been 51 seconds since I started timing the note taking. Again, any other questions you can feel free to ask. We're going to move on to the next bit if everyone's okay. So no one's complaining, let's move on.
When the blood sugar returns to normal, insulin production stops. Diabetes is an illness which occurs when the body doesn't produce enough insulin to keep its glucose level steady.
So you can start looking at this. What is diabetes? We can write this down. An illness which occurs when the body doesn't produce enough insulin to control glucose level. If you eat too much sugar, it messes up your pancreas or your endocrine system. It can mess it up. And because of that, the insulin won't be made properly. So too much sugar has a danger in that you can mess up your body's insulin production. And if you have low insulin levels, you're going to have a lot of sugar in your blood because now there's no insulin to get rid of it. If you have a lot of sugar in your blood, you're going to have some serious problems. If you have a lot of sugar in your blood, you're not even turning the glucose into fat or glycogen because there's no insulin to do that. You're going to have problems. So get this page down, guys, and as soon as you do it, tell me. Okay, let's move on.
Low insulin production starts a series of reactions. Symptoms of diabetes include a high level of sugar in the blood. Glucose is no longer turned to glycogen or fat to give the body energy. Diabetics lose weight and excess glucose is excreted in the urine.
If you ever look at a diabetic and their urine, if you're a doctor or a nurse, or if you've got someone in your family who's diabetic, you'll find that the urine is very dark because it's got glucose in it that the body can't get rid of. And so the body has to find a way to get rid of it. It uses urine to get rid of it. The body's amazing. If it can't do something one way, it'll try and find another way, even if the other way is not as good.
This needs a lot of water, so diabetics feel very thirsty.
A diabetic should drink a lot of water because they're urinating a lot. Because to urinate, you need water to get the sugar in there, because sugar dissolves in water. So the diabetics, if you're a diabetic, or if someone you know is a diabetic, the advice for them is to drink water.
Diabetics can also become unconscious unless they are given artificial insulin.
If there's too much sugar in your blood, you can faint. Yeah, you'll find people fainting when they're diabetic sometimes, and then you give them the injection and they come back.
Covering that. It's important that diabetics check their blood sugar levels regularly.
And you press the timer there, so you can see that's 23.4, Louise, and that's far too high at the moment. But it's nothing to worry about because the doctor will just give you some more insulin tonight and bring it down. Let's compare it against this colour chart.
Diabetes has been when probably the most famous couple who won a Nobel Prize, Banting and Bess, first described the origins of diabetes in the pancreas.
So these guys in 1921, they connected it to insulin. They realized that diabetes is happening because of insulin levels not being right.
What they actually did was, and some previous co-workers, removed the pancreas from dogs, in fact. And on removing this pancreas, the dogs immediately became diabetic.
So it's not nice what they've done with animal testing. They took the pancreas out of the dogs, and because the dogs are not making insulin anymore, they became very diabetic.
In other words, what they started to do is drink a lot and pass a lot of urine, and ultimately they would die within a few weeks.
Terrible.
They then found that by taking extracts of this pancreas and mixing it up in a laboratory situation and then giving it back to the animals, that they corrected the problem of diabetes and they would be back to their normal.
Was injected into human diabetics. The results were dramatic.
When they injected insulin, they realized that if you inject insulin or give someone insulin or some animal insulin, it will control the blood sugar. So then they thought, what about if we do this to humans? What about if we give humans insulin? Like when we gave the dogs their own pancreas and had insulin in it, and the dogs became less diabetic. Will it help humans as well? So then they done it to humans. So that's insulin. The next bit we need to look at are sex hormones in more detail. So write down the title, sex hormones. And make a little gap, maybe leave a half a page gap underneath insulin, because we're going to write more about it in a bit. After half a page or on the next page, write down sex hormones. We've only got 15 minutes left, so we'll try and finish it.
Next, sex hormones. Make sure you know the role played by the human sex hormones. These are estrogen and progesterone in women and testosterone in men.
So these are the sex hormones. In women, you have estrogen, progesterone. You have to know what they are. You have to know that they're in women. And you have to know testosterone is generally in men.
The ovaries produce the female sex hormone.
Some of you might have missed that, so I'm going to leave it on for another second. Estrogen in women, progesterone in women, and
testosterone in men.
There you go. Leave that on for 10 more seconds in case you're copying it. Okay.
The ovaries produce the female sex hormones estrogen and progesterone.
So you can put an arrow next to progesterone and estrogen and say ovary. That's where it's made. And for the testosterone in the testes, T-E-S-T-E-S. You already wrote that earlier, so you don't need to write it down even.
They're responsible for sexual development and the menstrual cycle. The testes produce the male sex hormone testosterone. It controls male sexual development and the production of sperm. Here's a sample question about human hormones.
So, what we're going to do now, let's do another 6 marker, because this is where people need help. So we're going to write down the 6 mark question here. I'm going to, obviously right here, we're going to go through it like we do all the time. I'm going to share the screen, 1 second. And here's our 6 marker. I want you guys to write this question down. Can you see the whiteboard, guys? Just one person can answer.
Yeah.
Okay. So the question is, explain the role of insulin in blood. It's a very short looking question, but I want you to do as much detail as you can. It's a 6 marker. So write that question down, and then I want you to, so you've got 1 more minute, guys, before the 6 minutes is up. And we're going to use someone else to answer that one in a minute. Let's see. I will choose a blue pen maybe for this. Yeah. So 30 more seconds. I'm going to ask everyone for a point. So Marco, tell me first, what could you say, or what have you said about this?
I said that the role of insulin,
Yeah?
to control the amount of glucose in your body.
Oh, beautiful. Beautiful answer, Marco. The role of insulin is to control the amount of glucose in your body. Could we say something else apart from body here, Marco?
Blood.
Very good. In blood. You have understood the main concept of it, which is good. So what else could we add to that? Could we add anything else from anyone else? Let's ask everyone for a point. Yeah, so what could we say?
I said that the role of the insulin in the blood is, well, I was going to say what Marco said, but
Okay, can you add something to what Marco said? Can you add some more detail to what Marco just said?
I remember what he said. It said something about, I've already done on my notes. But,
No problem. Hold the thought. Hold your thought. Can you add something to that, Josepha? What is the insulin? Huh?
It converts glucose to glycogen.
Very, very good. Glucose to glycogen. Is there anything else that it does? And allows, what could we say here, Roger?
Glycogen reduces the blood glucose concentrations back to normal.
That's good. It converts glucose to glycogen and allows glucose to be used by the cells, to enter the cells, for respiration. So let's remember, insulin does two things. It lowers your blood sugar. So we can say over here, overall, lowers blood sugar. Yeah, we should have said, that's the first thing we could say. And the second thing we could say is this. It lowers blood sugar. How does it do that? It converts glucose to glycogen and allows glucose to enter the cells for respiration. So there's two ways. The glucose gets turned into glycogen and it goes in the cell. So if you have glucose, two things can happen to it. Just remember that. Let me just, glucose. It either becomes glycogen or it goes in the cell. Just make sure you know that. That's how glucose is lowered. Lowered glucose happens because some of it's made into glycogen, so no, less glucose now. Some of it goes into the cell and is made into energy. Less glucose there as well. So overall, lower glucose in the blood. Yeah. So role of insulin is to control the amount of glucose in blood. So we can say here, lowers it. Lowers it. How does it lower it? It converts glucose to glycogen and allows glucose to enter the cells for respiration. Two things can happen. So there's about 3 points there with good English. So we've got about 4 marks. How can we have some more marks? What can we do?
and say the glycogen turns into fat.
You could say glycogen then becomes fat. That's not a bad point. We could also talk about, and in a comprehensive answer, what would happen if there was no insulin? So glycogen turns into fat. So what happens here is low insulin or no insulin means high blood sugar levels. High blood sugar levels. And now we need to remember what else we learned, which was the following. I'm going to write it down. So therefore, will cause reactions to happen in the body. If you have too much sugar, it will cause reactions. It will cause non-useful reactions. Also, the need to urinate will increase. Need to urinate will increase to get rid of sugar. And also, if you can't use the sugar in your cells, if the sugar is not going into the cells to make energy, if the sugar is not entering the cells for respiration, let's use a technical word here, for respiration, now the cells can't get sugar, what's going to happen? Your fat, you're going to lose weight, your fat and your muscle is going to start breaking down. The body will start breaking down, because when you break down fat, you can turn it back into sugar. And when you break down muscle, you can turn it back into sugar. Body will, it's called glucogenesis. Body will break down fat and sugar No, sorry, not fat and sugar. It's fat and muscle. For energy. E-N-E-R-G-Y. And that's going to be dangerous because when you break down your fat and the muscle, you lose weight. So the last point you can make is you will lose weight. And losing weight is not always a good thing. Lose weight and, let's add one more, become weak. That's just something I'll add on. Because if you lose weight and if you haven't got muscle, you're becoming weak. And if your heart becomes weak, you're going to have a heart attack. Does that make sense, guys? Yes? Tell me.
When you say it converts glucose to glycogen, what converts?
The glucose gets turned into glycogen. The insulin helps that to happen.
So insulin helps that, but the liver does that.
The liver does it, but the insulin sends the signals for the liver to do it.
So insulin is just like helping. Yeah.
Insulin is like a signal telling the body what to do. See, the hormones, we said earlier that they are messengers. They give signals, and then the body does things in response. So the insulin is basically a hormone, which by definition means it's a messenger. It just sends a message and tells the body what to do. It's also a hormone that sends a message to the cells. If you have a cell, it's for sugar to be allowed in. Sugar won't be allowed in to a cell unless the insulin is there telling the cell, let this sugar in. It's like your mum telling you, let this person in the house. Yeah? Does that make sense, Audrey?
Yeah.
Okay. So we said that, and we've got 2 minutes left. We finished off on the 6th marker, which is good. Excellent, guys. So next week, we're going to continue with this topic. We're nearly finished with it, but you can see how detailed it is. Next week, what we're going to be looking at is, we're going to recap diabetes. We're going to fill in the blanks on it, because you should remember what we learned this week. We're going to answer Ajah's question, which is diabetes and obesity, and how they're linked together. And we're going to look at glucogen, another thing Ajah mentioned. A little bit of osmosis. Yes, someone celebrated with music. It's a bit early, right? And kidneys and controlling water content. There's many things still. Once we finish this, it will be experts, inshallah, on a very long and sometimes complicated topic in science.